All right, everyone, please welcome onto the podcast today Julia Bardmesser. She is the CEO of Data4Real LLC and also going to be an instructor for us down at TDWI San Diego. We're going to talk today about one of the courses that she's going to be teaching there around stewarding data, but she's also teaching another course on becoming a data-driven organization. I'm very excited to talk with her today. Before we jump into all of the good information around stewarding data, Julia, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And if you wouldn't mind maybe sharing a little bit of background about yourself for folks to get to know
Of
you a little
course,
bit better, that would be great.
of course, Andrew. Thank you for having me. So I'm Julia Bardmesser, and I've spent over 25 years in the industry leading data and technology transformation programs for large financial services companies such as Citi, Deutsche Bank. My last industry position was Voya Financial, where I led end-to-end data enterprise architecture and CRM development functions. And about 2 years ago, I decided that I was kind of done with the corporate life and I
Hmm.
wanted to start something of my own. And teaching has always been a passion of mine, and I always wanted to get into teaching. And I also wanted to share all the experiences in kind of looking back of things that worked, but more importantly, how to deal with the things that didn't work for me or didn't work immediately. And that's why this course actually, both of my courses are coming out not only out of things that worked, but also things that didn't work the first time, the failures I have seen both in my program because we all fail at something
Hmm.
and then try to do better, but also with the people I have worked with and my clients and so on.
Well, that's excellent, and you can see why we're very excited to have Julia instructing these courses for us with all of that knowledge in the real world and trying to bring it to, a classroom environment is spectacular. I think that is always the best for learning. That's what we hear from our attendees at TDWI conferences. But let's jump into the topic here, Julia. So we are going to talk about stewarding data, and in that
Mhm,
course. It's mentioned, governance is mentioned, master data
mhm,
management, metadata management, data quality, AI, all these topics are brought up there. Can you
mhm,
maybe
mhm.
tie all of those together for us as to how they're related to stewarding data?
So a lot of those topics, so this is all under the umbrella of data management. And data management is going back to the notion of failures. What I have seen that data management programs, data strategies often fail when they look only at the technology piece of it. Because data management is at its core business value of data and how business uses data for its purposes. So it's building capabilities to allow businesses to grow, to deal with the challenges in the data-driven way. So all of those disciplines that you've mentioned, they all have, of course, the technology component. And in TDWI, there are a lot of courses that cover the technology component of it. The piece that's I haven't seen quite as much and that I had to often reinvent is how do you get business full participation, buy-in, and then what does business need to do? So what do the stewards do? So stewards have things to do across every single one of those capabilities, and if they don't do them or they don't do them willingly and mindfully, it doesn't work. No technology actually helps.
Interesting. And so I mean, in regards to, governments, master data management, all those different pieces, it's common you're saying that data stewards don't necessarily just work in one of those domains.
Mhm.
And so then can you talk a little bit about in your experience how many data stewards a company might have? I mean, given that, if they're trying to work within all all
Yeah.
of those different facets, it seems like that might be a tough job for just maybe one or two people.
Well, especially considering that in many companies it seems to be in addition to their full-time job already. So that's one of the reasons I have this course is to show to people not only that this has to be done and it's precondition to success, but actually how much work there is. So you can't really do it. You cannot do business data stewardship as yet another thing that somebody will do off the side of their desk after they're done with their full-time responsibilities are usually data stewards are people in operations or in the business analysis, business reporting types of function, and they already have more than full-time jobs,
Right.
usually to deal with all the problems with the data that come up. So that's actually one of the points of the course, that it does need to be staffed if you want to have a success of the data strategy as a company, as a business, not as a chief data officer or data technology person, but as a business. If you invest in, you have to invest into business stewardship, and it's not a small role. So that's actually one of the points. And I have seen it depends on the size of the company,
Hmm.
it depends on the complexity of the company, it depends on the age. Complexity is often function of age,
Hmm.
and number of technologies that have gone through. So there are a lot of some. So the answer is it depends.
Sure.
Usually it's at least one person with business line, but again, it depends on also the how the data strategy is thought of, what are the business outcomes it accomplishes. It doesn't have to be all at once. So you don't start by saying first figuring out those 10 people are going to be data stewards,
Right.
and then we're going to do things, and then you figure out things to do. It's kind of the other way around. You start from minimal viable product and go from there.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. And I think you kind of alluded to it here, but I wanted to call out a specific part of the abstract for the course that struck a chord with me. And I'll quote it here. It says, "Passionate business leadership is the missing ingredient to a successful data strategy." Again, I think you kind of were maybe working towards that
Mhm.
in your previous answer. So I hope I'm not being redundant. But can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about what that means to you and why that's so important?
So again, and it comes from a lot of experience of leading transformational data programs. And even within the same company, I have seen success in the teams where business was really into and understanding that what we were building together jointly, it was a collaborative exercise. It was business strategy, business data strategy, and then the technology team was building capabilities to enable. And the outcome and the amount of uplift those initiatives gave to the business was very different from a different business line where there was somewhat of a reluctant agreement. Okay, kind of see it. Yes, you get the policy, and I need to put somebody in. But if there wasn't a full buy-in, we kept to have to bring them to the table, and it's much more complicated, and also quality of the decisioning suffers. So a lot of it is passionate leadership, belief, and understanding how what they do helps their business.
Hmm.
It's not that they help data, it's how what they do enables business to use the data well to achieve its goals.
Yeah, that's very good. And it sounds a little bit like another form of trying to build a culture, if you will. I mean, is that
It
kind of,
is culture.
yeah.
It is culture. It's absolutely that's actually where the scores of that curriculum overall what I teach started, because problem with the failures, there is like dismal statistic. 80% of the digital transformation programs fail. I think at this point I've heard something like 90% of AI programs fail to scale beyond MVP.
Hmm.
And some parts of it, for AI, a lot of it is data, but for data, a lot of it is culture. It's not that we don't know technology or we don't have people even in the company, but it's a culture of the company. So yes, a lot of my curriculum is very squarely how do you create data-driven culture, and what does it mean, like day-to-day activities.
Hmm. No, that's a very important move, and I think a lot of companies have understood that that's an important shift for them to make. You know, maybe at different times over the last couple of years, but certainly most companies should realize now that if they're going to try and do things, it makes sense to at least try to build a culture, which is not always an easy thing to do.
It's changing of the culture. So a lot of job of data teams of data leaders is change management. But
Hmm.
again, you can do all kinds of slogans or half-hour training saying data is important to everybody. You have to know what to do, when to do it, and the importance of it.
Hmm. Okay, so I want to drill down a little further into one specific topic here, which is governance. And I'm curious, how do you view business having to get involved with actual data governance?
So data governance to me is a lot of it is data discipline. So data governance is I see it as in the middle between all the other disciplines, and it creates collaboration between technology operations and business. So business is very much involved in data governance. In fact, if data governance is not bringing business to the table, that's a completely recipe of success. I mean, I have seen it so many times. Technology team, architecture team goes off, does data catalog, never talks to business. Data catalog doesn't have anything other than technical data, and then slowly dies.
Hmm.
So a lot of work around data governance, and that's understanding what data you have, where it is, what is right source for the data. Those are business questions. Those are not technology questions.
Hmm.
There's some where is the good source, a little bit of it's technical, because if your good source is a COBOL master file, it's probably not very accessible. So you need to figure out how to access it. And there are a lot of companies, and I know it sounds like what you're talking about, COBOL master file, but a lot of financial services companies are still operating
Wow.
on COBOL. Like the clue is, if in your bank, when you deposit a check, you don't see it till next day, likelihood is your consumer checking account is running on COBOL, because that overnight cycle, that's a function of COBOL mainframe.
Well, yeah, maybe that might scare some folks. They might go look at their banks right now and go and check that out. But no, but it's an interesting point though. And I think I actually am going to pair this with the last question I had for you around this course in particular was you also mentioned AI governance, and I think
Yes,
we're kind of moving in that direction for
yes.
this particular piece of the industry. I'm curious though, are you going to be focusing more a little bit on data governance for AI, or will it also include like AI governance, if that makes sense?
So I will be focusing more on the data side of it. AI governance, there are a set of challenges around this, around the models, that I think some of it is actually not resolved yet. So,
Mm,
for example, model bias, there is a data component of it where I'm going to talk about that and what can you do and how you manage that from the data perspective. But models themselves and how they process, and especially with Gen AI, highly complex models where you really cannot, there isn't looking at the logic. So some of this questions around AI governance, because we had machine learning model governance, especially in financial services, forever and ever. Like model review committees have existed, and
mm,
those are business committees, by the way, and not technology committees. But what they were doing, they have to adjust to AI models, because you can't do things the same way for Gen AI models. So some of it is not resolved. So I'll touch on it a little bit, but a lot of it what are the additional complexities that AI, especially Gen AI, brings to data governance. There is complexity, but it becomes even more central, because frankly, knowing how do you know that what Gen AI produces for you is correct
hmm.
is actually a data training question.
Oh, interesting. Well, and
Yeah,
that's the
model
number.
training. Yeah,
Yeah, that's like the number one question I think that everyone has, whether or not you're working on it on your own in your own, time or as a part of the organization that you're working with, trust in output. And so trying to reduce
yeah,
bias and hallucination, all these things are very important.
yeah.
And that's where I think, that governance piece is central, as you said. It seems like I have a lot of conversations with folks where AI on the cutting edge is so exciting, but it's hard for them to get into, exactly what they like to do because they need to actually work on the beginning, right? They got to
On
go
the
work on
data
data
side.
quality.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
seems like a
AI is,
constant
I
story.
call it bleeding edge. I had a boss many
Mm,
years ago, and he evolved the cutting edge into the bleeding edge, and
yeah.
that's a really difficult place to be in. And yeah, there is a lot around what data are you using, especially now as people are very excited about agentic AI, and frankly scares me to no end, because not only now it's information that you see back on the page, but then there is going to be an action taken on it. So how do you make sure the action is the right action?
Ugh.
Is actually, I don't think there is a good answer. That's a problem. I don't think we have a good answer yet. So the notion when I hear like, oh yeah, our structure, our strategy is we're gonna move to agentic AI. I'm like, oh,
Right.
just be careful. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
yeah. Keep on in the loop. Yeah,
Right, human in the loop for sure, and it feels like the ripple effect can happen at a very easy rate, and you start
yeah.
getting into those agentic systems where one small pebble into a
Mhm,
seemingly perfect pond creates
mhm.
waves throughout the system, and then potentially the whole thing is
Yeah,
catastrophe. So that's
yeah.
very scary. Yeah.
Yeah, I have the whole story actually. I had an I had AI, Claude actually,
Hmm.
help me with the travel planning because I had no time. I was incredibly busy in the fall, and so I had a lovely conversation with Claude about where to go from Bangkok for 4 days, and it gave me wonderful information. Uh, where to go, how to get there, the best hotels to stay, temples to see. So everything was
Wow.
great. And then I said, okay, so how do I get there? And it says, well, if you're okay with spending a little bit of money, the easiest way is to get a car service and have a car drive you there. I'm like, wonderful. Can you give me some like numbers and contact
Sure.
information for the three car service companies in Bangkok? And it gave me great three very plausible names, email addresses, websites, everything, uh, WhatsApp phone numbers. None of the three were right.
Oh
None.
my goodness.
So, and I went and I checked. So hotels were correct, temples were correct, advice to go in a car was correct. The customer. So now think for a second if it's agentic AI. Next thing I'm saying, make a reservation for me. It goes off, makes a reservation with non-existent company, potentially charges my credit card.
Right.
Uh, I get there and it was actually January 1st. So not the best time to try to find a car service, in the morning on January 1st.
Um,
So I was very, it wasn't agentic AI and it didn't do it, but you can see the
hmm.
danger of that. Because
Totally.
at this point, I was completely sure they gave me three completely correct companies.
Wow. And I
Yeah.
think the level of detail also would make you
Yes.
think, oh, these all must be real companies that
Correct.
I could
And maybe
contact.
they were like 5 years ago. They were
Right.
right companies. Maybe
Sure.
it's pre-pandemic. Who knows?
Totally.
But point is, it did not one of them was functioning at the moment when I was there.
Amazing.
So
Yeah.
that's why I'm scared of agentic AI a bit.
I don't blame you. I don't blame
Yeah.
you. We're all going to be having the hopefully the fraud works on all of our credit cards and
Yeah.
debit cards out there when we're starting to use agentic AI. I love that we ended up on a little bit of a tangent there on agentic,
Yeah.
but it ties into everything that we talked about
Yeah.
today. Julia,
Yeah.
I'm going to let you go at this stage, but I want to ask if there's anything that you wanted to touch on the course that we didn't really get to talk about for folks. They
Hmm.
are, two half-day courses, so
Yeah.
folks will probably take them consecutively. So if you have a moment, can you share a little bit about the first course for us, please?
Absolutely. And it is the first course. So the first part is about why. So it's geared towards, so one of the biggest challenges that I've had, how do you explain to business people, how does master data management, as an example, enables their business strategy? And it's not an easy explanation because you have to explain it in their language with in the way that's very specific to their goals and to their business. Again, I had situations where in one business line, it was very clear, and I would talk about the business case that we created in one business line for a different business line within the same company. And it wasn't a large company, it was all under, well, all of the company I work for are large companies now. I understand
Hmm.
better now. But and it didn't resonate at all.
Mm.
They were saying it's not for us, it's for them. So you have to explain it in the language that resonates with that business. So the first course that I have is how do you build that?
Mhm.
And I use business case studies and starts with this is what the company's vision and this is what their business strategy, and then you drill down to capabilities, but you go step by step by step and you show that why. So it addresses the question of why data capabilities, not just why data warehouse. Nobody, like everybody kind of agrees you need a data warehouse, except for me. I don't necessarily think you always need a data warehouse. Um, so yeah, that's the why portion. And this one is what and a little bit of how.
Perfect. Well, for folks that are interested, I will, of course, put some more information in the description of today's episode on the coursework. Julia, I really do appreciate your time today. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on and talking with me. I appreciate it, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
To subscribe to the Speaking of Data podcast, or to learn more about TDWI's research and training on all things data management and analytics, visit tdwi.org or click the link in the description below. Thanks for tuning in.